I'm going to start by talking a little bit about a solution set that is very much at the tip of the tongue of so many individuals right now when it comes to the delivery of CX, and that is simultaneous AI-driven voice translation. The bottom line is right now we're actively seeing demonstrations by different companies that are providing this simultaneous voice translation. So conceptually, you could have an agent who is speaking in English, servicing a Spanish-speaking consumer in the United States, and they would speak English. The interface would simultaneously translate it, and then the consumer would answer back using their own mother tongue in Spanish, and it would effectively go that way. So I want to start, perhaps, David, with yourself. If we could get your thoughts about where is this technology now, and how do you see this technology changing the offshore nearshore dynamic in terms of how service delivery is done in the near to medium term?
So I think there's two tracks that I currently have seen. One is an accent neutralization path that I think really does help our friends in the Philippines, in Latin America, in India, have an opportunity to deliver an experience that's more tolerable for some North American consumers. And so I think finally, for the first time, India probably makes a bigger play into voice. The other track that I see, and by the way, like it's still early stage for me. Like there's several of them out there, and we saw a bunch last week in CCW Vegas. I'm not necessarily completely bullish on it yet, but I'm willing to pilot. So I think in my head, when I was at DoorDash, it was, let's try this out. Because if it is successful, it does unlock. The other one that I've seen is the speech to text and text to speech option. That one is probably way more of a threat, I think, in the way I see it, because I can have somebody in India speak in Hindi and have somebody converse with somebody in Finland, which is a real tough problem if you've had a global footprint such as I have at Uber. It's tough to find. Nordics, for example, very few countries do it, and that's why the cost of support is still high. Both of those two, I think, for me, present a bit of a threat to nearshore, because for the first time, the affinity advantage that you would have in Latin America, for instance, to North America, then starts to go away a little bit. And I might be able, as a business owner at DoorDash, be able to say, you know what, if I can actually have good speech to text and text to speech options, then I don't know if I need to pay a rate above a certain level. And of course, that's probably going to drive a lot of the decisions that I do. There's others like BCP, but I would think more about what am I going to do? How can I do this work? Now, look, there's a yin and yang here, and I think that there's a lot of work that I might do in North America that would be seen as it has to be done here. Now I can start to think about taking the next first step, which would be, so how do I then flow some of the North American work down to, say, Latin America, where I still felt like I had good affinity? And so I think that to me is an opportunity that balances the threat of offshore. And I think, look, even the Philippines and India now have new competition in Africa. Yeah. I think there's lots of other places that are coming up today that could benefit from all of this technology. I think part of what I might think about in terms of balancing here too is what are the ethics here, around this type of translation? I had some struggles within DoorDash to think about using a speech to text and text to speech option, because it really completely alters the voice, and our corporate communications and legal teams were pretty concerned that it would be a struggle for reputation if we're in fact altering voices. So I think that we're able to deal with that in certain ways. But so I would definitely think, for me, there's a definite risk of work being moved to a lower cost geography. And I think there's also an opportunity to step up for nearshore locations to be more of an extension and a thought partner for the North American company that you are servicing, so that they actually see you as an indispensable part of their network versus the butts and seats options. Because I think the butts and seats providers in LATAM actually have, and Nearshore, sorry, have a quandary if you aren't playing a more important role in the company that you're dealing with.
I think that's a really, really interesting point you're taking. And Ninela, I'm going to ask you to jump in here because you have the unique perspective of working for a company that provides AI right now, but you also have a great background working with BPOs that have done service provision out of LATAM, out of the nearshore. So David raises a very interesting pickle here that a lot of these nearshore providers are going to be facing. At what point are they able to compete effectively on that pricing model that they've been able to take advantage of, if all of a sudden a lot of this work using AI solutions is going to be done out of places like Philippines, like the India, that I think we can all acknowledge are much lower cost destinations than you might find perhaps in Spanish-speaking LATAM. And if you could just give some thoughts on that, and I'm going to have a quick follow-up question once I hear your comments here.
Very important. So yes, just so you know, just a little quick, I do come from a BPO background, 13 years working for a BPO. Now I do work for Amplify, which is a technology AI company. And something that I always say is that AI complements human capabilities. It does. And talking about, labor cost and how it actually impacts the nearshore and also Latin America. So for instance, let me get on that. Jamaica, I'm gonna put an example here. So Jamaica, Montego Bay, we see the absentee rate is very high, especially because the culture, and we were talking about this just earlier with David right now. Culture plays a big part here. And if we were to implement tools like AI, like Amplify into cultures like Latin America and in Jamaica, it'll change significantly the production in your call centers. And I'll explain why. Because when you have enablement performance tools that can enhance skills and go with human capabilities, your production will increase, and then buyers out there will actually see potential, in working with your BPOs. So for instance, let me explain. In Jamaica, we see the absentee rate going high. If we were to implement these AI tools where they can actually see improvement in the skills that go set to set with the workers, it'll tremendously change the culture, the vibe, the skill set within that. So in Latin America, for instance, we are professionals. We want to work in a call center where we can strive, where we can continue to make an impact, not just stay within one single position. So when you have AI implementation tools that can help, reduce your average handle time, increase your NPS, and then helps the skill sets of your worker, you're making a tremendous impact and change. So BPOs do need to implement these type of tools. It'll help much to increase even the labor costs.
Okay, and let's stick on that for a second, because you mentioned skill sets, and there's some skill sets that can be learned. There are other skill sets I would say are inherent. And this is where, going back to what David, you were saying about the cultural affinity that Latin America has to the United States, to parts of Canada and so forth. These are skill sets where I'm curious, Ninela, from your perspective as somebody who's traveled and worked extensively in LATAM, where do you see the inflection point where there are certain elements, certain functions that could be shifted perhaps to lower cost destinations overseas, but there are ones that are going to be perhaps more value add that are going to be required to be done out of a location like a Jamaica, like a Mexico, like a Colombia, like a Honduras? Where do you see that gap effectively being filled, or what's the delineation point where you think about lower cost work being done by AI-driven agents versus ones that need to be done closer to home by an agent that might perhaps have a greater skill set when it comes to the affinity of the demand market they're dealing with?
I would think Colombia, it's a big part, but now we're also seeing that Trinidad and Tobago is actually an opportunity right now. If that's what I'm answering to what you're saying. But like, for instance, the skill set, yeah, I would say Trinidad and Tobago is an opportunity where the growth is there. Colombia it's huge because you got a good B2 level English. You got workers that, I always say skill is something that you're always efficiently growing it. It's not, you're born with a skill, but you're polishing it as you're progressing. And I think Colombia has a huge impact in how now BPOs are implementing their strategies within Latin America. I think it's an opportunity there.
Now we're being fed lines by a lot of different so-called evangelists that AI is going to kill the contact center with solutions like we're talking about today. So Colin, from your angle, from your perspective, where do we have to draw the line in terms of what we should expect from a good AI solution, a frontline solution? Perhaps it's powering an agent simultaneous translation or even potentially even automation tool versus the hype cycle that is really, really being fed down the line by a lot of different organizations and so-called evangelists.
The AI space is kind of interesting, and I think it really all starts from the endpoint of how you want to impact your customer experience, and then you kind of work backwards from there. Because I think there are some AI technologies that open up a lot of possibilities when it comes to using BPOs, and others less so. I think the example of simultaneous voice translation is a good example of something which I wouldn't necessarily assume is going to be a significant game changer for a few different reasons. I mean, one reason is because I think we all understand that when you're looking for foreign language capabilities, you're not necessarily just looking for the mechanics of someone being able to translate one word from English to another language. But there is that cultural affinity that comes with it, and the ability to engage with a customer and not only speak the language with the context and the cadence and the phrasing that they understand, so you can connect with that person. So there's a whole series of cultural attributes that you're trying to shine forth in that conversation that AI may not be that good translating, or that there is an inherent difference in having someone sitting in Latin America speaking Spanish than someone in the Philippines using a translation service to kind of augment that. So I think we have to be mindful that it's not just the mechanics of the words, but there's a whole cultural aspect to that as well. I think the other challenge is that certain industries have more challenges with AI when it comes to what you're trying to translate, because there may be more nuances in terminology or phrasing and more legal sensitivities. So for instance, right now I'm in a virtual healthcare company, and there's a lot of messiness in terms of translating, especially across languages, concepts in healthcare. So one of the things that, for instance, where I work now, we deal in the fertility space, and the concept of egg freezing, for instance, you don't use huevos when you're speaking in Spanish. It's a different word, right? But that is something that AI can screw up. So you have to be very, very careful of very nuanced industries, like financial services, another one, where there's a lot of emotional sensitivity using an AI tool. I think there are also a lot of exciting things in AI around augmenting human capabilities, like you were just talking about, with things like agent assist technologies, right? So real-time bots that work on the back end that guide agents in everything from the next best actions they can take to resolve a customer's issue, to limit the training time the agent has to go through and help with process adherence, especially for things that may be more complex, that in normal circumstances, maybe you'd be a little bit more worried about outsourcing that, and you think, no, we've had to keep this onshore. You may feel more comfortable going offshore, knowing that there's a wider suite of capabilities that those agents can use to be supported in real time as they're trying to navigate customers through circumstances. And that can also help. There's a lot of AI tools that will kind of listen to your voice as you're on the phone, let's say, or as you're engaging in a chat or even writing an email, and help with things like tone correction.
David, from your perspective, how watertight do we need to anticipate these LLMs are going to be to make sure that that localization element is going to be taken into account when these types of tools are deployed?
For me, I think, and especially, I know there's a BPO owner in the crowd here. Companies like DoorDash, work for DoorDash, Chime, Financial, Uber, Capital One. I can tell you that probably in no circumstances was I ever going to open up the code and allow a BPO to enter in and do things that would be on their own. They're not going to use a large language model that I have not endorsed myself, and I'm less likely to give a company that's not my company access to my code to be able to implement a large language model and train it. Training maybe, but I'm not going to use theirs. So I am going to use my own, and I'm going to ask you to use the output from whatever that training is. For me, the place of AI today is making sure that I have the most well-prepared, prompted, and providing flexibility within your understanding of the individual situations from a personalization perspective. That's what I'm looking for from you.
Where do these fit in relative to the Mexico-Colombia axis that we've seen so popular the last 10, 15 years?
Actually, Honduras. I was so impressed with Altia City. Last year, I went to a summit in Honduras. The professional, the agents there, their English is phenomenal. You wouldn't even imagine they even have an accent, because a lot of these individuals, they actually go to school in America. So they come either to New York or they go to Miami, and they actually go to universities, well-known universities, where they're actually getting capable to get these jobs, because they know that coming back to Honduras and getting a job in a call center, it's actually a career path for them. So for them to be in a call center, they know they're going to grow. They're going to be leaders, and they're going to be, managers, and then eventually executives. So I was really impressed how Altia City is building a park, not just a technology park, but for BPOs. Teleperformance is there, Alorica, and other big BPOs. And they're really investing in Honduras because of that professionalism that adds into their call centers, because they do take part in their jobs. They see that not only English is well spoken, the Spanish too. So they also have some French in there too as well. I was very impressed with the French speaking. But El Salvador, actually, it also brings a lot of opportunities. It's very safe. Google's there now. I've been to El Salvador, and I'm just really impressed. Now, big enterprises coming in. We did see that Miss Universe was held in El Salvador. So a lot of companies do want to invest in El Salvador. And just how Honduras have good B2 level English on the agents, you'll find it in El Salvador too. Also, you'll find not just French, but they also have Greek language. I was impressed. So it does bring a lot of opportunities in Central America. Costa Rica is another one. Guatemala, a lot of people don't see it, but Guatemala also has very good labor cost, and it's better than what you all see. And all of the America enterprises are actually in Guatemala. All of the infrastructure is actually in Guatemala. So Guatemala also brings a lot of opportunities. And in Latin America, I do still think, Colombia. I am from Venezuela, but Venezuela has, I was speaking yesterday to a VPO. They did open in Venezuela, and it's also very good B2 level English. A lot of professionals there. It is like David was saying, you have to educate people, because they think, because Rwanda, all you think about is genocide or everything that's happening. Same in Venezuela. Oh my God, the political, but it's not like that. Every country has its own beauty, and it has its own professionals. And, if you're a healthcare company, for instance, you truly have to see, okay, where is best that I can outsource if I'm going to work with a VPO? Why? Because it's so important. Banks, information, cybersecurity. There's a lot of things for instance, DoorDash. How do we get the empathy on customers? Because we're working with customer experience every single day. So really choosing your nearshore or your offshore has to play a big impact on the vertical you're in, because it's true. Not every vertical that you work with is going to be great in other places. But yeah, I do believe that's what it is.
Thank you very much.